Greetings from Wisdom Words, a peaceful place to pause and reflect. One story at a time, we examine timeless teachings about life, serenity, and purpose here. So, pause, inhale, and let's get started. Sometimes saying goodbye with anger or distance isn't the hardest part. These are the goodbyes you initially didn't want to say. These are the feelings that originate from both grief and love. We are taught that love entails enduring pain, standing up for others, and remaining. However, life gradually teaches us that true love occasionally necessitates letting go. And that is the subject of this tale. Walking away was a sign that you began to care about yourself, not because you had lost interest. When you finally acknowledge that you may love someone truly and still know they aren't meant to accompany you on every step of your trip, a certain kind of tranquility descends. We like to believe that love is meant to endure forever. That seems like a reasonable assumption. However, some people are lessons rather than lifelong friends. Some love stories are not meant to last but to help us grow. And that's all right. Giving your heart to someone who eventually fades into obscurity is perfectly acceptable. Even though they are no longer in your life, the love you offered still matters. You were shaped by it. It made you softer. It made you realize your potential. If everyone you loved was still in your life, would you have room to grow into who you are now? Most likely not. Certain individuals are intended to represent chapters rather than the entire book. There was a woman named Claire a few years back. Daniel has been her partner for nearly 8 years. They were full of hope, laughter, and dreams when they first met in college. However, they developed in diverse ways over time. Claire desired development, Daniel desired stability. She sought change, he wanted comfort. They made an effort to make it work. They conversed, made concessions, and attempted to revive their relationship. Claire, however, understood in her heart that she was no longer content. She had lost her identity. After another quiet fight one evening, she came to the realization that love shouldn't cause you to shrink to fit into someone else's reality. She then turned to go. Not with resentment, but rather with a subdued sadness that arises when you realize a chapter is coming to an end. Yes, it crushed her heart. However, it also set her free. Because she was choosing herself for the first time in years. And sometimes walking away entails coming back to oneself rather than fleeing from love. Think about this for a moment. Are you clinging to someone in your life because of habit, fear, or guilt? Is there someone in your life who once brought you comfort but now saps your energy? We frequently confuse loyalty with endurance. However, remaining where your spirit feels little is self-abandonment, not loyalty. Sometimes the best loving thing you can do for both of you is to walk away. The fact that love isn't always sufficient is among the most difficult realities to embrace. Even if you share wonderful memories and have a profound affection for someone, you can still acknowledge that your paths are diverging. Staying isn't necessarily the result of love. Occasionally it entails standing away to allow both hearts to breathe again and simply saying, "I wish you the best." And what do you know? Failure is not that. Maturity is that. That is bravery. True love doesn't ensnare you. It helps you learn when to let go. Since their early years, Michael and Ethan have been best buddies. Together, they experienced school, grief, hardships, and laughter. However, Ethan's energy evolved with time. He became aloof, pessimistic, and skeptical of everything Michael attempted. Michael persisted in attempting to keep the friendship intact. "This is my best friend," he thought. "I can't simply leave." However, he came to the realization that he was not preserving the friendship. He was preserving an extinct version of it. He therefore gave up trying so hard. He simply left the room without making a big show of it or giving a lengthy statement. Peaceful area. He felt lighter months later. More concentrated. More of himself. He realized in that silence that leaving didn't imply treachery. It meant being accepted. Consider this. What if turning away is a sign of wisdom rather than weakness? What if you make room for something that will succeed the moment you cease forcing what is not working? When we walk away, we frequently believe we're losing someone, but occasionally we're actually rediscovering who we are. Explaining yourself constantly to someone unwilling to understand you causes weariness. It shouldn't feel convincing to be in love. It ought to feel tranquil. Perhaps it would be beneficial to pause and reflect, is this genuine love or simply a fear of loneliness when you discover yourself constantly seeking to be heard, seen, or validated? You don't stop caring when you walk away. It indicates that you have given up seeking tranquility in places where it no longer exists. Sophia was raised by a critical and aloof father. She spent her entire life trying to win his approval by silent obedience, a successful career, and flawless grades. It was never enough, no matter what she accomplished. She felt exhausted, wounded, and self-conscious after every visit. She realized that she was no longer the young girl who was hoping for love that never materialized after having yet another traumatic conversation. She could love her father from a distance without losing herself in the process of trying to be the person he wanted her to be. She began to visit him less frequently. She ceased her explanation. She began to live. It wasn't simple. She did, however, gradually find calm. She was able to recover without harboring anger because she was able to go away. Perhaps you have also stayed longer than necessary in the hopes that things will improve. The truth is that you cannot heal in a place that continually harms you. The calm farewell that goes, "I wish you well, but I have to take care of my peace now," can sometimes be the most affectionate. Let this be the one thing you take away from this chapter. You are entitled to leave even those you love. You can decide to forego pressure in favor of tranquility. Growth instead of guilt. Restoring the past is not an option. You still adore them despite this. It just indicates that you have decided to love yourself at last. And that's strength, not selfishness. I want you to sit with this idea as we begin the following chapter. If you abandon clinging to the past, how would your life change? Gentle endings can sometimes be the beginning of the most powerful beginnings. Breathe, then. Give it up. And have faith that leaving doesn't mean your story is over, it just means that it's over. After leaving, there's a little period of time that feels nearly intolerable. It is too silent. You reach for someone who is no longer there when you wake up. Anticipating a message, you examine your phone, but it doesn't arrive. The pain that lingers after doing the right thing is what no one can prepare you for. People say that time heals, but in reality, time doesn't heal everything. It simply trains you to make do with the remaining space. The topic of this chapter is not forgetting. It involves learning to bear the memories, the love, and the anguish without allowing them to carry you. Our first reaction is to battle the emotion when we lose someone we love, whether it's due to distance, decision, or life itself. We make an effort to fill the void. We divert our attention. We relive talks in an effort to find areas where we could have done things differently. But when the pain subsides, recovery doesn't start. When you stop fighting it, it starts. Acceptance means persevering. This hurts, and that's okay, it says. It's deciding to stop hoping for a different history while acknowledging what has already happened. Ben was one of the men. He ate dinner with his mother every Sunday. It was their custom to share stories, laugh, and eat comfort food. Ben continued his routine after she died. He would set the table for two. He would prepare her favorite dish. He would feel grief and love occupying the same place as he sat there and stared at the empty chair. Months passed. He stopped placing the extra plate one day. He did it because he had finally come to terms with the fact that she would not be returning, not because he was forgetting. However, he experienced something new, peace instead of grief. He understood that letting go did not erase the love. It entails figuring out a new approach to cope with it. In your life, you may have been clinging to an empty chair, a person, a memory, or an extinct version of yourself. What would happen if you began attempting to let go of it instead of wanting to relive it? The majority of people are unaware that love endures even after a person leaves. It transforms. It becomes softer. It turns into a subdued reminder of the past and the person you were as a result. Sincere love marks your spirit. It changes, it doesn't fade. Therefore, don't try to remove it. Allow it to inhabit you in a different way. Even if you live far away, you can still love someone. Even if you say nothing, you can still wish them well. When love no longer requires reciprocation, it has reached a mature state. After their breakup, Emily wrote her ex hundreds of texts, but she never sent them. She would fill her phone with her feelings every night, erase them, and then pressed send. She eventually quit writing one day. She no longer required a response to feel at peace, not because she lost interest. Sometimes the message isn't meant to be sent, she began to realize. The purpose of writing it is to let your heart rest at last. What would be the final thing you would say to a deceased loved one? And what if you are the one who needs to hear it the most? Key Lesson 3: Embracing pain attaches you to the past, not to it. Pain has an oddly comforting quality. When everything else seems uncertain, it provides us something to cling to. However, clinging to pain traps love rather than protecting it. Grief can occasionally be mistaken for loyalty. We believe that we will forget them if we stop hurting. However, healing does not make the memory go away. All it does is help you recall without breaking. You pay tribute to the past by continuing to learn from it, not by remaining there. After 40 years of marriage, Harold, an older man, lost his wife. He would come to the garden they had planted together every morning. He couldn't bring himself to touch it for the first year. Weeds became tall. The blooms withered. He decided to plant again one spring. He wanted her memories to experience something new, not because he had moved on. Every bloom was a fragment of her love that was still alive, and every blossom became a story. Healing entails creating something new in addition to remembering what was, not forgetting. Consider this: where in your past are you shedding tears rather than expressing hope? Saying "I forgive you" is simple, but true forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about letting go of the burden of bitterness. To let go, you don't need an apology. Someone who failed to bring you serenity during your time together doesn't need to give you closure. Saying "you no longer control how I feel" is the definition of forgiveness. It's deciding to let go of a burden that was never yours in the first place. And occasionally you have to forgive yourself, not even them. Tired of being upset with her ex, Sarah stepped in front of her reflection one morning. "I forgive you," she said in a murmur as she glanced at herself. She, not him. For remaining too long. For disregarding her intuition. For providing more than she got in return. So did the tears, but so did the relief. Self-forgiveness is the first true step towards healing. What are you still holding yourself responsible for? And what would happen if you let that go at last? You'll know you're getting better the moment you can smile guilt-free. You haven't forgotten. It indicates that you made it through. Closing your heart is not the same as moving on. It involves reopening it to new people, experiences, and incarnations of yourself. You're worthy of feeling bright once more. You deserve mornings without pain, evenings without tension, and laughing that doesn't feel forced. Letting go marks the start of freedom, not the end of love. Sometimes you may still miss them. That is typical. You didn't make a bad decision if you missed someone. It indicates that your heart remembers, and that's all right. However, don't assume that you need them back because you missed them. Walking away is the hardest part, and you've already done it. It's time to start living again. Your new life often begins when it feels hardest to let go. A certain silence trails behind emotional storms. The painful silence isn't the noisy sort. It's the silence that seems peaceful but empty. Little things like the sound of your breath, the sunlight coming in through the window, and the morning fragrance of coffee begin to catch your attention once more. When you ultimately cease resisting the pain, that is when healing begins, not when everything is perfect. It was harder to walk away. It was difficult to let go. But this is the time to start rebuilding, this quiet after everything. This chapter is about regaining peace, which comes from knowing you'll be okay even when things aren't. People believe that after everything is resolved, the relationship, the job, the family, the pain, peace will be found. Peace, however, is not a destination. In the midst of chaos, you learn how to create it. It's your silent choice every morning. I refuse to be controlled by that which I cannot. To be at ease, you can't wait for the world to settle down. Peace must be practiced while life is still chaotic. After his divorce, a man named Robert used to take morning walks along the sea. For months, he saw the ocean waves as nothing more than background noise to his sorrow. However, something changed one morning. He paused and listened intently. He saw that the waves always calmed down, regardless of how choppy they got. And he understood that avoiding storms was not the goal of peace. The key was to have faith that they wouldn't endure forever. For the first time in a long time, he smiled that morning. He finally experienced hope, which was greater than his pain, even though he still felt hurt in his life. How long has it been since you felt completely at peace? What were you doing or avoiding at the time? Often, the little places we ignore are home to peace. On calm mornings. For lengthy strolls. When you finally give up trying to make things right, take a deep breath. Our world is a fast-paced one. We replace things when they break. We desire a speedy fix when something hurts. However, it is not how the heart heals. It doesn't follow set timetables or travel in straight lines. It takes time to heal. It's not level. Some days you feel fine, but the next day you feel awful again. That is recuperation, not failure. Allow yourself to recover at your own speed. You owe no one rapid advancement. All you have to do is be honest with yourself and feel what you're feeling until it stops controlling you. Hannah was a woman who enjoyed painting. She began painting a portrait of her brother when he passed away, but she was unable to complete it by the middle. She sobbed each time she picked up the brush. The picture stayed unfinished for years. Then one day she came to the realization that perhaps it was never intended to be completed. Perhaps the incomplete portion of the painting served as a reminder that some love stories never truly come to an end, and it was her way of preserving his memory. To attain serenity, she didn't have to finish it. All she had to do was quit criticizing her method. Because waiting is painful, what aspect of your healing have you been hurrying through? What if the healing process includes the waiting itself? Everyone longs for closure, a last discussion, an explanation, a time when everything makes sense. However, usually, other individuals don't provide closure. It results from realizing that the solution lies in their quiet. While you wait for closure, you are caught in the same emotional cycle. When you acknowledge that certain chapters don't have a concluding sentence, you can find peace. After 10 years of relationship, David penned a letter to the person who vanished from his life. He didn't send it. He understood that the letter was for him, not his friend. He was able to express all he wanted to say by writing it down. That night, he torched it and observed the smoke floating into the air, as if he were letting go of something that didn't need to be there. Occasionally, that's what closure looks like, acceptance rather than dialogue. What if you decide to cease waiting for the resolution you've been seeking instead of someone else? After sadness or loss, everything seems empty. Everything feels different, including the tunes you used to play, the places you used to visit, and even your everyday activities. But gradually, you begin to replace that void with fresh significance. You establish new customs. Fresh giggling. Fresh aspirations. That is respecting the past by living on, not replacing it. When you begin to concentrate more on what is yet possible and less on what has already happened, peace blossoms. Sundays, the day they always spent together, became confusing for Lucy after the death of her best friend. She began helping at an animal shelter one morning rather than avoiding the day. She took solace in assisting others in their recovery. Her Sundays changed, they weren't better or worse, they were just different. When you turn what was previously painful into something significant, that's where peace starts. What aspect of your suffering would you use to give it meaning if you could? Being at peace is sometimes considered never experiencing sadness again. However, that is untrue. Emotion is not eliminated by peace. It brings it into balance. It lets you experience intense emotions without getting overwhelmed. You can go on even if you miss someone. You can be joyful and sad at the same time. You may move confidently into the future while still looking back with fondness. That is true peace, presence, not perfection. Jenna sat on her balcony and watched the sunrise a year after ending a traumatic relationship. She became aware that she hadn't given him any consideration in weeks, not because she had made an effort to forget, but rather because her heart had at last found peace. She had lost her sense of resentment. She was thankful for what she had discovered, for the person she had grown into, and for the peace she had at last discovered. That is the sound of healing, not quiet, but calm. Ignoring the storm won't bring you peace. It can be found in recalling that you survived. It's a good thing that you might not be the same person you were before. You've gained wisdom. Stronger but softer. And while you're sitting in this silence, keep in mind that the story doesn't end with peace. It indicates that you've finally come to terms with the way things turned out. You left. You relax. You were at peace. You are now prepared to start over. After the storm, the solitude, and the heartache, there comes a time when you look around and realize you've evolved. You're not who you were before it all happened. There are areas where you're stronger and others where you're softer. Yes, you have lost individuals, but you have also discovered aspects of yourself that you were unaware of. You see surviving at this point in the journey and begin to live once more. This is where the inquiry changes from why did they leave to who am I now? This chapter will explore rediscovering your identity, purpose, and peace after losing yourself. I just want to feel like myself again is a common statement made by people after experiencing loss or sadness. In actuality, though, you won't. It's not a negative thing either. You are not intended to return to your former self. You were that person before you realized what you would learn from this suffering. You've changed. You've changed. You now understand what is important, what hurts, and what heals. Discovering who you are is about becoming, not about going back. Mia collected all of the notes, letters, and photos she had kept from the relationship after a tough separation. One night at the lake, she put them in a box and set them on fire. She didn't do it out of anger. It was a new beginning for her. I'm not who I was, and that's okay, she remarked softly as she observed the ashes dispersing. She resumed writing after that night, focusing this time on who she was becoming rather than what she had lost. That's what makes rediscovery so wonderful. Making peace with the past and moving forward is more important than ignoring it. Consider this. Who are you striving to become again, the old you or the actual you? The previous iteration of you desired acceptance. Your true self desires tranquility. When you lose someone or something essential, the world feels excessively loud. Everybody has advice. Everybody has an opinion. But healing, real healing, starts in stillness. You start to hear your voice once more during the calm times. This is the voice that was overshadowed by your attempts to appease everyone else. You begin to understand what life feels like at home to you, what sort of people you want around you, and what kind of energy you require. Loneliness is not stillness. It is lucidity. For a week, Jacob avoided social media, work, and even his pals. He leased a tiny cabin in the woods and walked in peace, cooked, and read during the day. The silence seemed intolerable at first. However, something changed on the third day. He began to hear things he hadn't heard in years, questions, recollections, fantasies, and ideas. He came to the realization that he had neglected to think about life because he had been responding to it for so long. He didn't know everything by the time he left the cabin, but he felt like himself once more. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to simply be, without interruption, without noise, and without putting on a show for everyone? Quietness isn't meaningless. It contains all the things you haven't noticed while being too busy. You don't discover who you are all at once. You discover yourself doing things that bring your soul back to life in peaceful, everyday times. You may redecorate your area, go for a long stroll, learn something new, or simply sit outside and observe the surroundings. You become more intimate with yourself with each tiny act of presence. It's not necessary to know everything. One sincere moment at a time, you simply need to start taking care of yourself again. Alicia felt numb for weeks after losing both her job and her love in the same month. Then, for the first time in months, she laughed aloud while viewing a ridiculous video one afternoon. She was surprised by it. In that instant, she understood that mending is not something that announces itself. When your heart is ready, it simply appears subtly. That little laugh reminded her that she was still here. Joyful. Sometimes a single sincere grin is all it takes to rediscover who you are. What is one simple activity that you no longer undertake that used to make you happy? Perhaps a fresh start is in order. It's normal to want to maintain your peace of mind after leaving. It's a good thing that you start being selective about who you let in. However, don't totally isolate yourself. While life occurs in a community, healing occurs in isolation. Building better boundaries is the aim, not erecting barriers. Allow your healed self to make the decision rather than your wounded self when you begin meeting new people. Seek what feels authentic rather than what you lost. Aaron was reading a book in a coffee shop one morning. One of the strangers started talking about the same author. They spent hours discussing books, life, and personal development. Love wasn't immediately apparent. It wasn't intended to take the place of what he had lost. However, it served as a reminder that he was still connected and that he could, at least somewhat, open his heart once more. Rediscovery feels like that, being receptive to life rather than jumping into something new. You don't need to have faith in everyone. All you need to do is have enough faith in yourself to recognize when something or someone feels right. Acceptance is the last phase of rediscovery, where one looks in the mirror and declares, "This is who I am now." You have experienced suffering, loss, bewilderment, and transformation. However, you remain upright. You're smarter, more realistic, more conscious of your value. To be deserving of love or peace, you don't have to change who you are. All you have to do is accept yourself completely, kindly, and without regret. Rachel established a little morning routine after years of self-doubt. She would write a brief letter to herself and place it on the mirror in her restroom each day. The lines "you're enough" and "you're doing fine" initially seemed forced. But they eventually turned into the truth. She began to realize that she no longer needed the notes months later. This realization occurred because the words suddenly made sense to her. Remembering what was true about you all along is what self-discovery is all about. Regaining your identity is not about changing who you are. Coming home to the person you were always meant to be is the main goal. You left what wasn't right behind. What was too weighty has been released. You've accepted the things you cannot alter. It's time to rebuild now, with purpose rather than suffering. The focus of this chapter in your life is not on those who have left. You are the one who stayed. You remain here. Still expanding. Still developing. And for that, we should be proud. You eventually get to a point that feels lighter after letting go, stepping away, finding peace, and rediscovering yourself. You are no longer being held down by the burden of old expectations, old hurt, or old people. Forgetting the past is not the topic of this chapter. It's about taking bold, hopeful, and purposeful action. It involves reopening your heart in a sensible manner rather than foolishly. It's time to welcome fresh starts. Sometimes doors close softly, and other times they bang. That's just the way life works. It's simple to believe that everything will cease when you walk away. However, it isn't. Every conclusion makes room for something fresh to come into your life. Novel encounters. New individuals. Fresh possibilities. The next chapter is always ready when the last one finishes, sometimes in unexpected ways. Lila relocated to a new city following the breakup of her long-term relationship. She had no acquaintances. She had no strategy. One day, she unexpectedly found herself in a painting class at an art studio. She impulsively signed up. Everything changed with that choice. She started making art that inspired her, made new acquaintances, and unearthed latent talents. It was heartbreaking to her when her romance ended. In retrospect, however, it turned out to be the gateway to the life she was destined to lead. Which doors in your life have closed because you were frightened to enter them? The hardest part isn't letting go at times. It's crucial to acknowledge that a new beginning is already underway. It can be frightening to start over. Fear will murmur, what if it fails? What if you are injured once more? What if you don't succeed? But being fearless isn't what courage is all about. It's about continuing on despite your heart quivering. You have previously left. You have previously let go. You made it through. You underestimate your strength. Marcus had always wanted to travel alone, but he was terrified to do so following a traumatic split. Nevertheless, he purchased a ticket one morning. He silently strolled through marketplaces, scaled mountains, and observed sunsets. He felt alive again for the first time in months. It was more than just the journey, it was the bravery to embrace life despite his fears. Little steps are the foundation of courage. Make one decision at a time. Even if it worries you, what tiny move may you take today to start over? It's normal to experience remorse, rage, or regret when we leave behind people or circumstances we love. Gratitude, however, is an alternative perspective. Having gratitude doesn't make the hurt go away. It respects it. It acknowledges that every experience you've had, including lessons learned, love, and grief, has influenced who you are now. When you focus on what you've gained instead of what you've lost, life feels lighter, fuller, and more vibrant. Sophia began keeping a gratitude book after ending a challenging connection. She wrote down 3 things, no matter how big or small, that she was grateful for every night. It felt forced at first. But gradually, she became aware of a change. The weight went away, but the discomfort persisted. Her attention shifted from what she had lost to the love and development she continued to experience. Gratitude served as a link between ends and fresh starts. What if every obstacle, heartache, and farewell you experienced in life turned out to be a lesson? Could you start to acknowledge how your present has been shaped by your past? You must bring yourself along before you can invite anyone or anything new into your life. Love for oneself is not selfish. It serves as the cornerstone for all other things, including enduring peace, meaningful experiences, and wholesome relationships. Establishing boundaries is a necessary part of self-love. Determining what is best for you. You should prioritize your health without feeling guilty. New beginnings aren't frightening when you begin with self-love. They're thrilling. Evan began going to dinner alone himself after years of depending on other people to validate him. It felt strange at first. He eventually discovered happiness in his own company, though. He let out a free laugh. He had a clear thought. He enjoyed every morsel. These tiny gestures of self-love helped Evan come to the realization that he was whole without anyone else. He was already entire, so he was prepared for whatever life had in store. It was harder to walk away. The long road was healing. Rediscovery was the silent process of rediscovering who you were. The prize now is to live life to the fullest. Life is awaiting you. Focus on the present rather than an idealized, distant future. Life invites you to take action with each sunrise, breath, and decision. Starting anew isn't the only aspect of new beginnings. They are about beginning with love, bravery, and knowledge. Thus, inhale deeply. To appreciate the trip, look only back. Instead of being afraid, look forward with joy. You left behind what no longer benefited you. What was holding you back has been released. You've rediscovered yourself and found serenity. It's time to live the life you were destined to lead. Awaiting you is the next chapter. You are the first to do it. Walking away creates room for a tale worth living, not ending yours. Give it up. Get better. Rediscover. Come on forward. You are more prepared than you realize, braver than you fear, and stronger than your past. You won't believe how brilliant the life that awaits you is.